In his exquisite book, Finding the World's Fullness, professor and poet Robert Cording writes, quote, "The poet's obligation is not to become a priest, but rather to become priestly, to evoke the world in such a way that what struck us as ordinary is revealed as miraculous. In the sounds of words, Wallace Stevens tells us, is a finality, a perfection, and an unalterable vibration that brings us closer to the muddy center, the first idea, God." Close quote. Professor Robert Cording reflects on one of my favorite books, Finding the World's Fullness, on poetry, metaphor, and mystery. His sublime reflection on the beautiful and the gritty world and the poetry that comes out of it now. My name is Todd Warner, and this is the Evangelization Culture Podcast from Word on Fire. Robert Cording has published 10 collections of poems, the most recent of which is The Unwalled City, a book on poetry, the Bible, and metaphor. Finding the World's Fullness, the book we're focusing on this podcast, was also published by Slant in 2021. 2 new books, What's Possible, New and Selected Poems, and Taking the Shadows Apart, are forthcoming in 2026 and 2027 from Slant. He has received 2 NEAs in poetry, he has won 3 Pushcart Prizes in poetry, and his poems have appeared in publications such as the Georgia Review, Southern Review, New Yorker, Poetry, Hudson Review, Kenyon Review, Image, The Sun, The Common, Agni, New Ohio Review, Orion, and the Best American Poetry 2018. Cording taught for 38 years at Holy Cross College, where he was the Barrett Chair of Creative Writing and Professor of English. After he retired from Holy Cross, he taught poetry in the MFA program at Seattle Pacific University for 5 years. He has lived in Woodstock since 1983 with his wife, Colleen. Robert Cording, welcome.
Well, thank you, Todd. It's great to be here.
Segment 1. The readiness is all. In the second scene of Act 5, just before Hamlet and Laertes engage in a duel, Hamlet says to his friend Horatio, quote, "We defy augury. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man knows aught of what he leaves, what is it to leave betimes? Let be." Close quote. So, Bob, for people that might develop a little vertigo when reading or watching Shakespeare, tell us exactly what Hamlet is saying to the degree that you can, and why is this title, The Readiness is All on Poetry and Mystery, the opening segment of your book, Finding the World's Fullness?
One of the things that I love about Hamlet is what Hamlet has to learn himself. He thinks he sort of knows everything. In the first scene where he's speaking, to his friend, he says, there are more things in heaven and earth, and that and yet he doesn't know that himself. In the course of the play, that's what Hamlet has to learn. He thinks he can figure everything out. He has kind of a scientific mind, like in the sense of a 17th century idea of reason, that we can reason ourselves to an answer. And one of the things that he recognizes is that he can't reason himself to an answer. He tries, of course, by setting up the mousetrap sort of scene with, to catch Claudius in the lie. He ends up stabbing the wrong person, during the course of the play. People, of course, at the end of the play are killed. But Hamlet, what he has to finally recognize is that he can't have all the answers ahead of time. Really, that little passage that you read has to do with let be. That's the sort of, it sounds like a paradox. But it's very hard to let be in the sense of, we want an answer. We want a certainty. We want somehow a rational explanation for what is in fact mystery. It has a lot to do with our own 20th century misunderstanding, it seems to me, of the word mystery. Hamlet has to come to an understanding of mystery. Mystery isn't something that we can ultimately solve. Our sense of mystery in the in our present day time is something like when we get enough data, when we have enough facts, then there will be no mystery.
Yeah.
Mystery is only something that we haven't yet solved. What Hamlet learns, of course, is that's not true. That's not true at all. What I've learned in my own life, mainly through deaths that have, I think death is one of the crucial experiences of life, because it wipes out any sense that there's some rational answer for what's happened. And when it's happened, I mean, people can sort of say after a horrible car accident, oh, it was because their tires were bad, or it was because this drunk driver hit them. But that doesn't explain anything. It gives you a rational explanation for why the accident happened, but it doesn't explain anything. And one of the things about Hamlet that's so crucial to me is that sense of everything has to be taken away, everything stripped away, so he can finally understand what it means that there are more things in heaven and earth than are in your philosophy. Because philosophy, literature, science can only get us so far. And what remains is readiness. Readiness to participate in the world. I mean, that sense of readiness, I would describe it in my own experience as I have come to realize after my son died at age 31 that my readiness is a readiness to embrace grief, because there is no escaping that grief. And the only way that I can be present to my son, who is here and not here in my mind, is to be ready for the pain of grief, a readiness to live my life as fully as I can and as painfully as I can. Not because I welcome pain, but because pain is a necessary part of love. We can't love unless we embrace the pain of suffering too, because that's part of life. You can't escape it. You can't outmaneuver it. You can't push it aside. It comes to all of us at one point or another in many shapes and forms.
This is so good, and it's so countercultural, because it strikes me that we all have that little Hamlet in ourselves that A, thinks we know it all, and B, thinks we can explain it all, and in so doing, we can control it all, when in fact, mystery keeps coming in through the cracked doors, or like the dust through the crack in the window, or whatever. It's always there, and obviously, along with mystery, is not only joy but suffering and pain and so on. I'm going to ask you: is your sense, and just going back to Hamlet for a second, but also about the mankind's or humankind's problem with this? Is Hamlet's problem that he's too young to know better, or would you say in our modern world, moving us past the Shakespearean era, even the old people don't get it? Even in Shakespearean's time, the old people don't get it. They blithely walk past the experience that should show them there's more mystery than control. They should know better, but they don't. So is Hamlet's naivete about knowing it all, reasoning his way through it, all that kind of stuff, is that born out of youth and naivete, or is that just the human condition, regardless of what age you are?
I think it's the human condition. I mean, I don't, and I have no doubt, in fact, that that's the human condition. What links the book that we're talking about all the way through is a series of characters. I mean, it may not seem this way because they're essays about various things, but basically, you've picked on one character, Hamlet. There's also, I would say, Abraham in the biblical story, and Job in the biblical story. All three of those characters want the world to conform to their understanding of the world, and they all suffer because of it. In Abraham, of course, he's confronted with something he can't deal with. Finally, he if you think of that Abraham story, it's a narrative, and for Abraham, who does the will of God beautifully, and Abram will become Abraham as Israel is created. But the problem that Abraham has is that on the one hand, he's way better than, say, Noah, who just blindly follows orders. He's kind of an adjustment to the Noah character in the Bible, in my mind, because Noah just follows the orders dead on. In the Jewish midrash, he has to stay in the boat after they discover where land is, because he has to pay penance for the people he didn't ask God about. The way Abraham says, look, if I can find 10 people in the city that are good, will you save them? Abraham is really different in that way. On the other hand, Abraham thinks that he knows what God wants all the time. He feels like he's able to read God's mind. And so when God says you're going to have a child, and that child will be, your descendants will be as numerous as the stars, Abraham, of course, laughs because it's unreasonable. His wife is past childbearing age, and it seems to him impossible. And that's the tension in that Abraham story, is between being able to do God's will and being able to think, or thinking, not being able to, but thinking that somehow you understand God better than God understands himself, or herself, or however you want to think about God. But it's that sense of, I can rationally get around, like, this makes no sense, right? My wife is past childbearing age. So sure, I'll try to have a kid with Hagar. And that messes everything up. And the Abraham story vacillates between those two poles until, it keeps going that way. Abraham does something absolutely wonderful. Abraham thinks that he understands something that he doesn't understand. What he say, the 3 guests that arrive, that he recognizes immediately that he should sit down and prepare a meal for, because they're part of the Lord. On the other hand, he's constantly making decisions that have to do with how he's going to get himself in trouble. The last test, of course, is the big one. God asks him something that makes no sense whatsoever, no rational sense whatsoever. And he says, you have to sacrifice your son, the son who is the future history of everything. And my sense of that story is that movement to Mount Moriah is really a movement that has to do with something like the final loss of rationalization, that what gets sacrificed on the altar is Abraham's rationalizing, thinking that he can rationalize the world, thinking that he can understand the world. He can't understand what he's being asked to do at all. And it's not a matter of like sort of silly faith.
No,
it's a matter of sort of finally coming to feel your way through. It's a being, a readiness to be. If you think of that whole journey up to Mount Moriah, every step of that way is a readiness to be. He sort of intuits, what's the next thing I should do? What's the next thing I should do? What's the next thing I should do? Right to the end of the story, it's all a readiness to be. And rather than a pre-understanding of what I should do, it's a readiness to be open to the moment, oh, here's a ram.
I was going to ask you, so when you think about humanity's or each person's fight to deny mystery in the name of protecting themselves, to grapple or hold fast to rationalization, to make sense of things, it seems as that's done when you get down to the base of it in order to avoid pain. And yet it seems that pain comes anyway. And then there's the other side to what you're describing, Abraham arriving at. And I love that notion of sacrificing his rationalization on the altar, and the notion of having a readiness to be. The other side is, okay, I'm surrendering to mystery, which doesn't mean I'm just going to flop around and someone's got to come and put food in my mouth because I'm not going to be active. I'm going to have things. No, you're just humble enough to open yourself up to mystery, and pain is there too. And what I'm curious is, and I know this is a big answer or a big question, but I mean, is the pain worse by having all these defense mechanisms, or is the pain worse when you just run headlong into mystery? And it strikes me that if you run headlong into mystery, at least there's an authentic part of you opening yourself up to God and so on, whereas the other one is just kind of almost delaying the inevitable or compounding the pain that might come as a result. Do you have a sense about that?
Yeah, when my son died, we read a poem by Jane Kenyon called "Let It Come," and it's a gorgeous poem, and it's basically about the way we need to move through the world is by letting come what has to come: darkness, sadness, pain. In her case, it was death, a very early death. But one has to have that sense of there is no escaping. My favorite poets all knew, from Herbert to Keats to Eliot to Stevens. They all had that sense, Miwash, of there's an inextricableness of joy and sorrow that we cannot take apart. They come together. They're of a piece. And if we try to separate them so that we only have joy or we only have happiness, we make a grave mistake, and we run away from life. We don't let it come. We don't let life come, because as soon as you try to avoid pain, you're not letting it come at all. You're not. There is no readiness to be, because you're closed off part of the experience of life, and part of that experience is going to be painful things. I mean, Christ. I mean, if we think of Christ, it's this radical openness to the pain and suffering of the world.
Yes. Well, and as a guy who came late to the Catholic Church, it was always vexing to me to see a Catholic crucifix as opposed to a Lutheran empty cross. And yet, as a Catholic, I've come to recognize, no, that Catholic crucifix isn't some morbid obsession with death. It's a reminder of the sacrifice made that renders in me a sense of humility. It's a reminder of the accompaniment I have in my suffering, that a God would die for me, and the promise of eternal life coming out of that. This grappling, and again, and I say this to my medical students and residents a lot. I said, look, for you and for your patients, for all of us, suffering is coming. That's not the question. And it's to one degree or another, at one point or the other, probably many times in life, it's coming. But the issue is, how do you cope with it? How do you grow from it? How do you pay the experience forward and open yourself up to the joy in the midst, the joy that kind of is inextricably bound with that suffering in those times. And again, this is what I think is such a strength of your clear-eyed but deeply honest grappling with these things in your book, Finding the World's Fullness, which I said offline, but I said in the introduction, this is just one of my favorite books. It is so good. So, but Bob, you quote poet Richard Wilbur, who declares that, quote, "The world's fullness is not made, but found." And you assert, quote, my aim is to sketch what it means for our language to take into account a world we did not make," close quote. So why is it important for us to recognize that there is something there that didn't have to be, something there that is brilliantly independent of me?
Yeah, I think it's the great mistake of our time. A person like Marilyn Robinson, who I love all her work, basically wrote a book called The Givenness of Things. And that sort of says it all. I think where we begin is with that sense that we live in a world that need not be, but is. And when you realize that, like, I think the Christian understanding of that is something like, God didn't need to make the world. It wasn't like he was incomplete and sort of needed the world to make. If that's true, if the world that we live in, and I don't mean that in 7 days of creation or anything that, but that sense of we live in a world that we did not make, and it seems to be gratuitously given to us. If it's a given, then what's our response to it? That's where Wilbur's coming from, that the world is given to us. What that means in my mind is not that we can understand the world, but that the world itself is intelligible. Those are two different things, it seems to me. That we live in an intelligible world, but not a world that we can fully understand while we're living in it. All writing wouldn't exist, art wouldn't exist, if there wasn't, let's call it, metaphorically, the fall. The fall is, Joni Mitchell says we have to get back to the garden. And that movement of getting back to the garden is where art comes from. It's where poetry comes from. It's where, music comes from. Everything is that movement back. And what do we have for that? That muddy center that Stevens talks about. Well, we have language. So two things are at play, it seems to me. One is that we live in a world that need not be, but is. The second is the only way we can understand the world, and not fully understand the world, but because the world is intelligible, we can understand at least some of it. And that's through language. We certainly make our meaning through language, but language isn't everything there is. I mean, that's where the great mistake in literary theory is, in my mind. And that was really the intention behind this book. I mean, I was writing because I felt adrift from English departments in general and the study of literature, which was basically moving towards this notion that, because words don't really name a thing, or a real presence, then there's no presence at all. Does that make sense when I say that?
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
So my sense was like, now you're kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater there, that what we really need to realize is that language is, it's full of misprecision, but that doesn't mean that it's useless. And it doesn't mean that it's not trying to name something that it can't name. It may be true that it can't name it, but basically all metaphorical language, all symbols are that which we create because we're trying to name something that lies beyond our understanding. But we feel, we intuit, it's intelligible to us. Stevens, notion of a revelation in words by means of words is crucial to the heart of the book, Finding the World's Fullness. Because for Stevens, we are, we're people that have to understand that we're making notes towards a supreme fiction, to quote another poem, title. And what we're doing is we're trying, the supreme fiction will never be reached. We can only make notes towards the supreme fiction. We can't know all. Everybody has to learn that at some point, that we can't know everything we want to know. That's painful, but it's the reality.
And everybody seems, this is the thing, is that I think everybody in their core senses that, and yet we've sort of brainwashed ourselves in a scientism-oriented mindset that, oh, no. All we need to do is subject this stuff to this scientific method, run enough studies, get expert consensus statements, follow a policy plan, a white paper, and we're good to go. And it's interesting, Gary Saul Morrison, who I just love his work with Russian literature out of Northwestern, and he's been on the show previously, but he wrote a book, or an essay called Why College Kids Are Avoiding the Study of Literature. And in that, he talks about how no economist, behavioral scientist, or social scientist has ever captured human nature or understood human nature like Tolstoy did in Anna Karenina or George Eliot did in Middlemarch. And part of that is that what the social scientists oftentimes do is create something that doesn't exist in nature, as opposed to Tolstoy and Eliot, who are capturing in all of its confounding, vexing, brilliant, joyful, mysterious aspects what it means to be a human being navigating the world. And so to your point, the reality of things versus this framework we're imposing upon ourselves about the way things are supposed to work. It's a striking dissonance. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In my mind, I mean, the person I like the most as somebody who speaks for literature and human nature is Marilyn Robinson, Christian Wyman as well. There are people who understand that the world we live in is not something that we're going to understand fully at any moment of our lives. And yet, if we live in mystery, we also live in an intelligible world.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we know that? Because we have disciplines. We wouldn't have the discipline of science. We wouldn't have the physics. We wouldn't have mathematics if the world wasn't intelligible to that degree, that rational degree. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, I don't think people realize just how gorgeous a notion that is, that the world is intelligible to us. We're not left like adrift in a world that makes no sense. That's not true. We're the only place we can, and I wouldn't even call it floundering. I mean, I think it's much more of the sense that it's the search as human beings that we all must make, to be at home as much as we can in our homelessness. We're always searching for that sense of belonging. And that's, for the Bible, basically that sense is not by living by a series of codes or prescriptions. But I mean, the Bible from start to finish in my mind has it's the least prescriptive of books in my mind. And what I mean by that is it's got one idea from start to finish. And what makes it what it is and different than literature is that it's a book on how to live and how to fully come into being. The Bible has this central idea all the way through. Wake up. What does it mean to wake up? How can we be present to the presentness of things? And it's there from beginning to end. It's not something that says, don't do this. When we're given the 10 Commandments, it's the map out of the wilderness. I mean, if you think metaphorically about the 10 Commandments, it's an act of love. I mean, obviously, it is Torah, which means love. But it's also the map that the Lord gives, or Yahweh gives, to get out of the wilderness. And it's not because we shouldn't do those things. It's because if we do those things, they harm us. They keep us in the wilderness. If we kill somebody, if we steal from somebody, all those things keep us wandering in the wilderness forever. And in that sense, they're saying, wake up. This is what you need to do. You don't need to build golden calves. You need to build the Ark of the Covenant. And that's going to be your own labor. And it's going to come out of the love that you feel for what you've been given.
This is so good. And Chesterton talks about it when he writes on why I am a Catholic, how the church has been, thinking for 2,000 years. It's the only institution that's been thinking for 2,000 years. But speaking to what you're saying about the Bible, the notion of saying it's a map of the mind. It tells you the dead ends you've gone down that you shouldn't go down. It's trying to say, we argued about that for 30 years or 500 years or whatever. That's not the right path. You got to go this way. And as opposed to being just a school marm with a rod that wants to rap you in the knuckles because you did something wrong.
Yeah, no, it's a how to live book, or how to live more fully book. It's our, my hero Northrop Frye and George Steiner in his book Real Presences. He always calls it, there's something more to the Bible than literature. And basically, that something more comes down to the fact that it's a how to live book. That if followed, you're not going to be a better person and assure your seat in heaven. It's going to be how to wake up. How to be fully alive, so that we don't. I mean, my sense has always been that our fear of death is really the fear of never having lived. What I love about the Bible, about Christianity, is at its best, it helps us to live the most full life we can as a human being.
It goes back to the readiness is all, right?
Right. The readiness is all.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the title in that sense that you asked before, that the world is full. That is, I'd like to have written on my gravestone, something like the heaven and earth declare God's glory. Now that's translated different ways now, but that's from the King James one from the past. But what that means, and the key word there is declare, not in the sense of proclaims, but the sense that it's, if we're experiencing the world aright, then that declares is self-evident. That is, we should feel, and I think Marilyn Robinson gets at this best, the sort of the joy of living among the created things. That there's an innate joy there that declares God's glory. Not something that we have to rationalize, not something that we have to work still. It's just there. It just has to be perceived. Marilyn Robinson's famous line in her book Gilead is, right perception is right worship. That what John Ames has to see and write about and learn in the course of his lifetime is that, it's not like you're looking for a world other than the one that you're in. What you're looking for is to see the fullness of the world that you're in, that every moment has a fullness that exceeds the normal, the ordinary. And that's what if you think about what right perception is, it would be perceiving the fullness of reality at any moment.
Yeah.
That it's much fuller than we think it is. Same thing with Stevens. It's that sense of it's something more that it's just itself. It's just an oak leaf, as he says, looking at an oak tree. But when seen in the fullness of perception, it's miraculous. It's not that question. It's how does it get to be like this? It's the question of why is it at all? Like when we're seeing in that, or what I would call full perception, we're always in the mood of, or we're always in the frame of not how did this come to be, but why is it at all? Which is the much larger question. It's the question that God basically addresses to Job. Job wants to know, how did this happen? Always, right? He's constantly sort of saying, this is unjust.
Yeah.
And of course, the reader of Job knows that it's unjust.
Yeah.
But that's not the idea right there. I mean, that the thing that God is trying to teach Job, it seems to me, is this notion that, you're trying to, do you really want to live in a world that is based by human standards of what's just?
Yeah.
Or is there some kind of ultimate justice that's greater than the justice that you're looking for? Thus the whirlwind speech, which is given, I think, in the book of Job, to jolt Job the way a Zen koan would jolt you out of your normal perception of reality. It's that speech by God, which doesn't answer any of Job's questions.
It asks more questions than it answers.
Right. It doesn't answer anything, but basically wants to sort of jolt Job out of the awareness of not how could this be to why is there anything.
Yeah. There's one writer who I thought when I was younger, I read him and he characterized Job, what God said. He kind of condensed it, basically saying, Job, if you so little understand my operation of the physical universe, how much less do you understand my operation of the moral universe? And I think at the end of the year, I love the notion you're saying he's seeking kind of pat answers that comport with justice as human beings understand. And we first have to understand that God is grander than we could ever imagine. And secondly, sort of like what Christ said to the Pharisees, you're missing the point, guys. You're getting hung up on this, and you're missing the more expansive nature of the spirit behind the stuff you're getting hung up on.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, and that's why, when Wilbur uses that phrase, "finding the world's fullness," he's basically saying, the world is already full. Everything in the world, every hunk and color and manifestation, every leaf, every blade of grass is miraculous without our saying anything about it. What our saying is trying to do is discover that miraculousness. Sure. I think I see if I can find this. This is Czeslaw Miłosz, who says, when a thing is truly seen intensely, it remains with us forever and astonishes us, even though it would appear to be there is nothing astonishing about it. And that's what I'm really trying to get at in that book, is that sense that the ordinary world is extraordinary. It's with the right tilt of the head, and I don't mean like rosy colored glasses or anything like that, but it's there every second. And one of the things that I've learned, certainly since my son died, is that life brings us back to life. And that's an extraordinary thing. As you said before, one of the things that we learn is that God suffers with us. And the other thing that we learn is that there's something in the world, the givenness of the world, that helps us restore ourselves.
Yeah. Bob, you've been focusing so much on perception and seeing, and which leads me to my next question. In your book, Finding the World's Fullness, you focus a great deal on attention, and you observe seeing is impossible without love or reverence. That is, seeing is an exercise in overcoming oneself, in attending to something quite particular other than oneself. Only the detachment of love helps us to see what there is to see, as opposed to what we expect to see or are determined to find. Close quote. I want to circle back to the notion of, why are we so inattentive? Is it a world blindness? Is it a slavery to appetites? Is it an incurable impatience? What's behind this?
Probably all the things that you said. It's one of the things that's so difficult is that we replaced love and my sense of love in that love and attention kind of togetherness with something like a false objectivity of the world. When we moved in the 17th century towards a scientific view, which was crucial, absolutely crucial to the advancement of the world. Nobody would want to live without it. I'm not trying to say anything like that. I'm not trying to go backwards. But when I got to, this is a personal story, but when I got to graduate school for a PhD, it was a kind of an experimental program. It was built on Oxford, and basically it was like you got tutors. You found you told the group of professors what you'd like to study, and then they found you the perfect person to study that subject with. And when I got to graduate school, I had this. You took the regular courses and stuff, but these were like these special studies. My special study was, and it's profoundly changed my life, was I said I wanted to read John Ruskin's Modern Painters. It's like 5 volumes, and it's all about observation, how to look at things. And Ruskin understood something that, he taught me something very basic. And basically what he taught me was that you can't look at the world, you can't see the world accurately without loving the world as well. He was as good as an objective observer of the world as one could be. You only need to look at all his paintings in the Ashmolean Museum, like 10,000 cloud studies. They're scientifically absolutely dead on. His architectural studies, they're masterful at accurate detail. But there was another aspect to that, and that was he felt that unless you had love for the thing that you were looking at, you'd never really see it.
Sure.
And it's certainly true of human beings. Like as a teacher, I remember when my son finished college and went off to be a teacher, he said, "All right, Dad, you're this hotshot teacher here. What see if you can boil down all your years of teaching into one sentence. I don't want a big lecture here. Just give me a sentence.
Classic kid.
Right, exactly. And I said, more than anything else, love your students. If they don't feel that you love them, you'll never be a successful teacher.
Wow.
They have to feel that you want them to succeed every second. And you have to feel that you want them to succeed every second. Now, that's, in my mind, what love is. It basically has to do with this sense of giving your all to the thing that you're looking at. Whether... And you can train yourself to do that. I've been a bird watcher since college. And so I had a kind of natural instincts to some of this stuff. But I think one of the things that's crucial to do is, this is something that's not me, but Wendell Berry. He says, we're asked to pay attention to the world. And the reason why we're asked to pay attention to the world is that we owe the world our attention. And that's how he's using that word pay, that there's and that's what Ruskin means by love. That's what I mean by love, that we owe the world our attention. If we talk about the givenness of things, then our part in that is to pretty much participate with full attention. And full attention to, like in that wild sense or the vey sense, is, how do you get yourself out of what you're looking at? Well, the great thing about writing, for me, has always been, it's a spiritual act in the sense that it asks you to look at the world, the objective world around you, in a way that takes you out of yourself. You can only describe the world if you're really looking at the world. Not because of what you want to say about the world, but because you're looking at the thing in front of you. Elizabeth Bishop, there's a famous story about when she taught at Harvard, and one of her students asked her, it was a very famous class that she taught, had all these famous people like Dana Gioia in it. And, one student asked, how can I be original? And Bishop sort of looked at him and said, basically, if you look at something long enough and hard enough, you'll be original.
Wow.
Because you'll see it as only you can see it. Because you're original. You'll see things originally if only you look long enough and hard enough at it. And that's what I was trying to get at in all those chapters about perception in the book that you're talking about. That we have to train ourselves, because it doesn't come natural to us, because we want to be moving on to the next thing. But we have to train ourselves to look at the world and give it the attention that it deserves. Bird watching taught that to me. It was, I recognized when I first started to watch birds that I didn't care at all about compiling a life list. That seemed a little stupid to me, even, and a waste of time. What seemed important was being able to look at these birds long enough and hard enough so that I could understand their behavior and what they were doing, how they were different, even from place to place. Bird song, the same bird song, is slightly different. A goldfinch in Connecticut may not sound like a goldfinch in New Jersey, and to sort of recognize the individuality of each thing is, I think, one of the great acts of writing.
Segment 2, Unhappy People in a Happy World. Simone Weil once claimed, quote, "At the bottom of the heart of every human being, from earliest infancy to the tomb, there is something that goes on indomitably expecting. In the teeth of all experiences of crimes committed, suffered, and witnessed, that good and not evil will be done to him. It is this above all that is sacred in every human being," close quote. And as you've reminded us, Bob, Wallace Stevens would assert that we are, quote, "unhappy people in a happy world," close quote. Bob, why is this? And what would you say is the source of our joy?
The source of our joy. I think the source of our joy is something like reveling in the happening of the world. That we don't allow ourselves to participate in the joy that's going on every second. Right now out my windows, the way, we have the tail end of that hurricane sort of coming back as a northeaster up here in Connecticut. And there's a few leaves left on the lilac that I can see outside my window. And the way they're moving in the wind right now, which is probably at about 15 or 20 miles an hour, is really different than they move in the wind when it's like 2 miles an hour. And one could have, the joy is there every moment. I'm trying to look for something about that. Yeah, when Marilyn Robinson writes about John Ames, that's the narrator of that book, is looking at just water falling off a tree. And he basically says that, or she writes, giving him these words, that what was beautiful about it, it was just ordinary water, but it's a thing existing in excess of itself. And that's what I'm trying to get at too.
Yeah.
That the joy of the world is when we can see that these things exist in excess of themselves. And we don't always see that. It's not like we look and say, "Oh, that bird is showing us this excess of itself." But one of the things that I started as a biology major before I moved to philosophy and literature. And one of the things that I loved about biology, and never failed to ask my teachers who didn't like being asked this question, was that why do birds sing the way they do and even look the way they do when they don't need all that color or all that fancifulness of song to succeed in mating? We want to reduce it to birds sing because they want to attract mates, or they want to scare off other birds to their territory. It's territorial, or it's sexual reproduction, blah, 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 blah. All true. I'm not trying to deny any of that stuff. But still, if one listens to a wren sing, the song seems in excess of itself. And that part is just, people are just starting to pay attention to that. Like if you read books about birds the way I do all the time, it's a whole different study than it used to be, because they're trying now to explain why do these songs exist in excess of themselves? It doesn't need to be that grand. The bowerbird doesn't need to make this incredibly fanciful nest to attract a mate, and yet it does. That there's a kind of play in in various species that is play for the sake of play, the way human beings, exist in the play of the world. When we're happy, it's because we're playing in the playfulness of the world. When we're unhappy, it's because we falsely use our own understanding of things to try to make sense of the world. We don't have that readiness to be that we talked about at the very beginning. We're trying to control our environment all the time. I remember one of the earliest girlfriends I ever had. She would get, like, if we would take a day off to have a picnic or something, and the weather wasn't perfect. It would ruin everything, just ruin the day, it's that sense of, all right, this is what we get. We got this kind of day. Now what we have to learn how to be is, accept this day as it is, and live in the fullness of what it is, as opposed to wish that we had a different kind of day. Because the more we wish that we had a different kind of day, the more unhappy we are.
This makes me think, and people get tired of me talking about George Bernanot as a writer. The Diary of a Country Priest and Mouchette and Under Satan's Sun and so on and so forth. They're very difficult novels dealing with the trials in many respects of saints or priests or what have you. But what's amazing is, and this is why these books have haunted me and brought me back to them again and again, is they're very raw and very authentic about the suffering of the figures in these books. And yet that makes the grace that much more apparent. It just makes the grace just penetrate through in these incredible moments of wisdom or insight or miracle or whatever the case may be. And to what you're saying is, we do become a cramped people if we want to control all the variables and make everything just right, as opposed to saying, now just wait a second. Just wait a second. This is part of it. This the mosquitoes in the boundary waters and the rain, the rain that was gonna come, that we were gonna go out and go fishing. That doesn't mean that you have to be a fatalist about it or overly negative, but it's the reality of the experience that you didn't write it, but opening yourself up to the reality instead of fighting it makes for a completely different world. To your point of the readiness of all, is all, and to right perception and so on. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, that you could said it better than me.
No,
That's
no.
good.
So, Bob, in your chapter, The Longest Day, you focus on Christ's immediate actions when confronted by the Pharisees with the adulteress. And you make a point of saying, of noting how he squats down and begins to draw letters or designs in the dirt. Could you explain the significance of this moment, and especially with the concept of Seamus Heaney's rift and Keats' negative capability and your chosen phrase, in-betweenness? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, in that scene in particular, everybody wants the correct moral answer. A did so and so, and so the punishment should be B and C. Mm-hmm. When Christ asks us to pause, and Haney relates this to what poetry does. Basically, Haney's position in that essay is that when Christ writes in the dirt, it's the same pause that great poems do to us. They ask us, because poems are never pushing for, like, this is the right way. What they're really pushing is they don't have a moral. No poems, or only bad poems, sort of push towards a moralistic ending. What poems say is the world is this and it's that, and it's this and that simultaneously. And what Haney says that great literature does is pause us the way Christ pauses everybody when he bends down to write in the dirt, in the sand. And what that pause does is remind us to do the one thing that we hate to do, and that is look at ourselves. Instead of morally judging someone else, look at yourself first and say, how can you judge this other person when you're so fallible yourself? W.H. Auden, as another gloss on this kind of says we shouldn't say that we're Christians. We should always say that we're becoming Christians. And that would be a great correction, it seems to me, for the mistake that we make sometimes, thinking that we have the truth, rather than, not that there is no truth, but we probably don't have it ourselves. That's when we act sort of self-righteously. And of course, the people who want to stone the adulteress, are acting self-righteously in that scene. And all Christ wants to remind them is that this is way more complicated than you're making it. It's not A did something bad, so B, she deserves this punishment. It's about something so much larger than that. Here you are existing in a world that's been given to you, and you're not recognizing that. You're recognizing only what this woman did. And that's what that pause is about. Poetry wants to remind us that the world is bigger than we think it is. If we poetry, the great capacity of literature and art in general is it's very different than sort of, say, scientific writing or critical writing, where you're moving everything towards the argument that you want to make, and obviously at the end, the conclusion that you're going to draw. Poetry basically says something can be this and it can be that. It can be two things at once, and it gives us the experience of that over and over again. All literature does. The books that you mentioned before are experiences of life is this and it's that.
Yeah.
And it's both those things at every moment. And so we can't have the one without the other. It's Keats's, the odes are a spiritual journey of Keats. I mean, those odes are basically Keats's spiritual journey, with the last ode being, the Ode to Autumn, where he says, "Think not of the songs of spring." Autumn has its own music. And that's the this and the that. We want somehow to only think of spring and new life, but autumn, when things are reaching their absolute fullness, in that process of reaching fullness, is gorgeous in that right. Even though the things are going to die, very soon. There's that moment that we can only get in autumn, when everything ripens to its most full state. Spring, of course, is a different kind of thing. Autumn has its own song, and Keats lists them for us in that at the end of that poem. It's one of my favorite poems of all time.
The Ode to Autumn, that one, yeah. Bob, say something while we're at it. Say something a little bit for those who aren't familiar with the Keats negative capability. This phrase and comment he was writing in, I think, a letter to his brother. Tell us about that and how that figures into what we're talking about.
Yeah, for me, that's kind of a touchstone of almost everything I think about. It's almost like negative theology in the theological world, in the sense that what you're really trying to do is examine, as Keats puts it, negative capability is the ability to stand in that in-between place you were talking about, without the irritable reaching out after facto conclusion. That's a quote. And that's what we want. It's very hard to remain in the in-between place, which, of course, as human beings, we are always in. That's our natural state, in-betweenness. And what Keats is saying is that as soon as you reach out for conclusion, you cut off the world. That what you need is negative capability. And that negative capability is that which allows you to remain in the in-between state, without forcing a conclusion, without reaching, after something that you can hold on to. It's a very difficult place to live, but you're most fully alive in that when you accept the in-betweenness of your life. And we don't know what it was like before we were born. We don't know what it will be like after we die. We live in an in-between state. I mean, we can have our hopes, we can have our beliefs, but we live in an in-between state, in terms of birth and death. So what's our role here? The question then becomes, what can we do? Well, the first thing Keats would say is something like, accept the in-betweenness of your life. Don't ask for things that you can't get, because that can only make you unhappy. That's what Stevens means by we're, an unhappy people in a happy world, because for Stevens, we're imprisoned by our misperceptions. We're never seeing the world as it really truly is. Not the idea of the thing, but the thing itself is one of the famous Stevens titles. And we're always caught up in the ideas about the thing rather than the thing itself. If we could get to the thing itself, we would take joy in the excess of the thing itself.
So, Bob, you raised this whole book does such a wonderful job of pointing us to your thinking, the thinking of great poets and writers, and the faith and its perceptions on the conundrum of living in this in-between space, the permanent state that there will always be mystery there, the notion that suffering will chase us, and yet there's wonder, there's the world in excess, there's a creation that is good, there is effervescent joy that is always there or always around the corner. It's this mixed bag and so on. So the problem we have, obviously, is, again, I'm going to call you a counterculturalist again. We have this world intoxicated with achievements. We have a resume obsessed society that's forever distracted, forever efficient, forever on the go, forever wanting to tighten loose screws, belts and suspenders, everything. How does it strikes me that the part of this, much of your message is, there needs to be a surrender of control. There needs to be an embrace in humility. There needs to be a certain openness to the counsel of wonder. Am I getting that right? And what else could you say about how do we, not only in recognizing the mystery and the in-betweenness of things and the need for negative capability, how do we actually go about the discipline of and that's a very achievement-oriented thing to say, I suppose, but how do we go about opening ourselves up to that?
Well, I think it begins with, our understanding in some ways of beauty. We live, I'm thinking of beauty now with a capital B, to some degree. And I don't mean the sense that beauty is, like a platonic form or, those things that are pretty or anything like that. When I'm talking about beauty, it's like, I think the beautiful was always, whether we want to, when somebody like Jonathan Edwards read the book of nature as the book of God kind of thing, obviously that was wrong-headed on one level, but it was also quite correct on another. And that is that they read the beautiful was the sensory world in some ways that they lived in. The absolute joy of the sensory world is the place to begin always, it seems to me. When I said before that life brings us back to life, what I meant by that is there's just a sensory joy of being among the things of this world. It is extraordinary to be alive, and we forget that. To me, I've spent my life I've written about this a little bit, but when I was young, my mother always accused me of being depressed and dressing in dark clothes and everything else. And she said, you know what you need to do? You need to make a list of all the things that are bad and all the things that are good. And so, of course, I started with all the things that are bad. And I was like, and it was like, this was the early mid-60s.
Yeah.
The list was just, it never ended. It just never ended. But, here I was compiling this list of all this bad stuff. And it occurred to me that I didn't think the world was bad, that I didn't think life was bad. And it shocked me that my basic belief, and I don't think it was just like naivete. It was this sense that the world is good, in that sense of Genesis, when the Lord looked and saw that it was good, that something was good. And that outweighed everything. Like you could list all these horrible things, and yet that's what Vey means in that passage that you read before about that indomitable hope. The hope is that is in that sense of the goodness of the world. Like that outweighs all the depravity, all the awfulness, all the atrocities. And one must face all of that stuff. Never look away from them, and never not try to heal them, and never not try to do something about it. That doesn't negate that absolute good that we also feel, that somehow we feel like we need to cut ourselves off from. I think I grew up in the New York City area where, you had to be sort of ironic or sarcastic about everything. And it seemed to be just wrong-headed. That's not the way if we felt that way, we would all kill ourselves.
Yeah.
But that's not the way we move through life. That's not the way, that we experience life. The way we experience life is the sensory joy of the world we live in. And we don't pay enough attention to that fact. And that's the place, in my mind, always to begin, that we live in a goodness that we can't explain, that is excessive, that's mysterious, and that if we paid attention to it, it would explode our minds. So that's for me always the place that I come back to. I thank my mother for making me write the list of bad things because it made me realize that the world had this intrinsic goodness.
Hi, I'm Todd Warner, Managing Editor of Evangelization Culture, the journal of the Word on Fire Institute. Word on Fire is a global evangelical community that exists to provide our members with the resources they need to proclaim Christ to a secular culture. Our award-winning quarterly journal, Evangelization Culture, is offered exclusively to Word on Fire Institute members. It's a tangible representation of our mission and goal to lead with beauty in order to bring others to the knowledge of truth. Inside each issue, you'll find writing from premier scholars and inspiring pieces on literature, culture, and daily life from fellow missionaries on the journey to know and serve Christ. Get a copy of the current issue of the Evangelization Culture Journal for free by visiting wordonfire.org/journal. Thank you, and join us in bringing Christ to a hungry culture. Segment 3. The Agony of Coming Alive. Poet Stanley Kunitz, who figures prominently in the concluding section of Finding the World's Fullness, writes, quote, "In the best poetry of our time, but only the best, one is aware of a moral pressure being exerted on the medium in the very act of creation. By moral, I mean a testing of existence at its highest pitch. What does it feel like to be totally oneself? An awareness of others beyond the self, a concern with values and meanings rather than with effects, an effort to tap the spontaneity that hides in the depths rather than foams at the surface, a conviction about the possibility of making right and wrong choices, even symbolic choices. Lacking this pressure, we are left with nothing but a vacuum occupied by a technique." Close quote. So, Bob, I got to be honest with you. Having read now your book several times and loving it more every time I read it, I think I have 7 books from Stanley Kunitz coming to me in the mail. Tell us a little bit about the work and the life of Stanley Kunitz, and what it's meant to you more specifically.
Yeah, I think that phrase says a lot about what we've been talking about, the agony of coming alive. That it's not easy. It's not an easy thing. There is an agony to come alive. Yet coming alive is I like poets who basically answer the question, how are we supposed to live? Kunitz's answer to that is that we have to come alive. And coming alive to him doesn't mean avoiding all the agonizing things in the world. It means being perfectly aware of them. He was a great writer about the environment and ecology. But what it meant to him, he also had one of the greatest gardens the world has ever seen. He loved gardening. He loved messing around in the dirt, making things grow and flower. That's part of that coming alive. We all find, or should find, in my mind, look for the things that help us come alive. What is it? My interest in that last section of this book was I wrote a whole series of essays about various poets, but what they all have in common is that they're all asking some very basic questions. How do we come alive? When are we most fully alive, and what does that mean? Who am I, and how can I know who I am? That's more David Ferry, but those are the questions, or somebody like Herbert, who I write about a lot, and Elizabeth Bishop. It's that sense of how do we get out of ourselves so that we're fully living in the goodness of the world. We get in the way all the time because we want the world to be the way we want it to be rather than the way the world is. Kunitz is absolutely one of the best poets I know at accepting the world on its own terms, which is a testing tree for him, which is the title of one of his poems. To our task then is like, what is the stuff? What are the things that will most help us come alive to that, what I was calling before, that sort of sensory joy of being alive in a created world? For Kunitz, it had to do with taking walks, loving his wife, dealing with his family history, a father who committed suicide when he was a young boy, and it being a very something that his mother never talked about again. He had to overcome an enormous abandonment in some ways. And of course, those thoughts of any young person of, was this because of me in some way? And what he worked towards always is this sense of what I've been calling the sensory joy of things. He came back to that over and over again in his poems. That what are we asked to do in some ways? We're asked to overcome our own traumas, our own predispositions, our own prejudices. We're asked to see the world without the blinders that we put on because of all the things that have happened to us. Why Stevens puts it, we are unhappy people in a happy world. We're unhappy because of all these things that basically are the veil that prevents us from seeing the world as it is. We have ideas about the thing, but we don't see the thing itself. Kunitz is following that same idea, that what we're trying to get to is the world itself, not something that's bigger than the ordinary. It's just ordinary. But the ordinary is extraordinary if seen correctly. And seen correctly is, I've got to deal with the fact that my father committed suicide. I have to deal with the fact that life is hard. I have to deal with the fact that friends I love get sick and die. To see the world doesn't mean to avoid the world. It means to accept the world as it is on its own terms. And I've always loved the New Testament story of Christ because it's basically Kunitz was Jewish, but it's the same thing. It's the sense of how do we participate and live fully in a world that's kind of miserable,
Yeah.
And what's the answer to that? Something like radical openness, and that's Kunitz's answer. His answer to that is radical openness to the world as it is, and that's the agony of coming alive.
I'm come back to what you said earlier about how the Bible is one straight narrative on how to live, and I think about from a Catholic perspective, the Catholic faith celebrates the narrative of what it means to be human by the notions of what I would describe as dignity, calling, suffering, and grace. That you are a valued person, you're a dignified child of God, ineradicably valuable, inviolably intact in the eyes of God. Calling is the sense of direction and purpose that God is uniquely designed, or we are uniquely designed to seek that out. Suffering goes without saying; it affects us many times over, many degrees over, etc. And then grace, that which we kind of sleepwalk past all the time. That, to my way of thinking, the graces that alight us throughout the creation of what is good, but also through prayer, through the sacraments, through communion with others, through the works of mercy, and so on and so forth. That grace, to me, kind of is that notion of where you said your starting point is the sensory joy. Let's start from the fact that a young Bob Cording, dressed in his dark clothes and seemingly morose, starts with the fact that the world, after my long list of the bad, the world is good and life is good. And so it strikes me. So I just your book so describes our conundrum, and it strikes me again and again that Catholicism and the faith in Christ and the sacraments just say, come to me, if you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I'll give you rest.
Yeah, I mean I'm right with you every step of the way there. It's unfortunate how we're so adrift in a world where which we never sort of wake to. We can sleepwalk through our whole life, and all the things you said about the basic values of Christianity, that you're created in the image of God, and as such you are intrinsically valuable. If you believe that, and I believe that, then life is joyful from the start.
Yep.
And there's no getting around that. Every day is a participation in a world that, as how does Hopkins put it, that deep down joy in things. Each thing has this kind of deep down joy. The freshness of deep down things, I think, is the exact quote. And I think that's always what I'm writing about, is that freshness of deep down things, the what Hopkins in another place calls the thisness of things. That's what we're missing mostly in our lives, is that, and Kunitz is a master of getting to the thisness of things. How do we get, and what I mean by the thisness of things is again that idea of a thing existing in excess of itself. That moment where we realize that this is birdsong, but somehow it reminds us, as that Stevens poem does, that this is not just the first birdsong I've heard this spring, but it's about the whole creation of spring awakening, the sun coming back. That's embodied in that same moment. It's not just one little song. That moment is packed full of everything that's happening. The tilt of the earth, the sun, getting stronger every day, the light changing minute by minute, adding minutes every day. All that is in that bird song. And sometimes we see all that in the thing itself. Other times we just say, "Oh, that's a bird." And we go on doing the things that we do. The world really, if we want to be happy, we have to feel. I used to say to my students, who'd say, what's happiness? And I'd always said, it's if you don't feel gratitude, you'll never be happy. That happiness absolutely depends on gratitude, and gratitude depends on you realizing that you live in a world that you didn't create, and that everything around you, everything has been given to you. Wendell Berry used to say, "We don't make soil, we can't make air." And I think if we start thinking those ways, that these are the things that we've been given, those givenness of things, then the only response that we can feel is gratitude. I mean, it's the story of the Old Testament. The story is the Israelites can't get it. They don't get it. Like, hey, come on, man! I just took you out of slavery.
Now you're grumbling.
And now you're grumbling, right? I mean, that's the human condition. I mean, it's not the Israelites' condition. It's the human condition. The human condition is to always worry about the immediate and forget what just happened. And what it means to be free, rather than what it means to not have, chicken, or whatever.
Bob, as you write, I'm going to turn back to Stanley Kunitz one last time. As you write in your chapter on Stanley Kunitz, you write, quote, "To feel what it feels like to be totally oneself requires one to go through dark and deeper dark and not to turn. The paradox of life is that the heart lives by breaking. Any attempt to explain this paradox, to understand the psychological drama of mother, father, son, would be to reduce the complexities of human experience to a false simplicity. The furies that made him a man, a lost house, a lost father, a sister who went off and nothing came back, a mother who would not talk of his father, must be faced and suffered. The heart can only be nourished by opening itself. Such openness involves suffering and vulnerability and the acceptance of the conditions of being. The crucible where the self is made is a place where all the elements of disorder must be admitted and held in tension with whatever order is to be created." Close quote. It's brilliantly said. Now, Bob, I'm going to ask you this, and this is obviously very personal because of the loss you had of your son. You know this firsthand. Authentic living seems to always involve suffering, and it seems to grapple with that suffering that comes with authentic living is indeed, as you describe in this chapter's title, the agony of coming alive. But at the same time, I want to ask you, because there's people out there listening who have lost a son, who've gone through a divorce, who are dying from an incurable illness, who have a child who's on overdose or drug addicted, or whatever the case may be. Can people be blamed for self-preservation in the ways that we do? This human condition that blocks out mystery, that rationalizes, that grapples for control. Can they be blamed for self-preservation, even if it comes at the cost of a less authentic life? And if you don't mind, just share, you've shed it along the way here, but share your perspective on how did you come through what you went through with the loss of your son?
Well, one thing is, first, I think no one should be blamed for anything.
Yeah.
I just feel that, Simone Weil said that, we have to leave cracks for grace to get through.
Yeah.
And sometimes because of our suffering, because of what's happened, there's no fissures, there's no openings. And thus the very things that could help us are at a distance from us. They can't get through. After my son died, my wife and I used to take walks, and probably for 6 months, she never looked at anything but the street that we were walking on, or the woods that we were walking in. And then one day, I live in the country. There was two red-shouldered hawks doing their mating dance above the field we were walking past. And I said to her, look up. You have to see this. And of course, she did look up. And it took her entirely out of herself, just for moments, for minutes. But that moment was one of those fissures that allow the world to heal us. The hard thing for people, I think, is that they don't realize in their agony that the world itself is the only thing that can heal you. The world is the thing that damaged you, but it's also the only thing that can heal you. I have come to believe that a couple of things. One, that death, suffering, has to be embraced. I mean, I truly mean embraced, not just lived through, not just suffered through, but embraced. And what I mean by that, very simply, is the more I allow the pain of my son's death to be part of my daily life, the more my son remains present to me. And he can only be presence in his absence. And it's only in the intensity of that absence can I feel his presence. It sounds like a Zen koan or something.
No, not at all.
It's not a riddle. I mean, if the dead are here and not here. They're not here because they're not alive, but they're here in us through love. And the more we love the person who has died, and by love I mean fully embracing the fact that they're no longer with us, but this is what he would say as he looked at the hawks, or this is what he would, say about that. That's painful.
Yeah.
Everybody says you have your memories, but memories are mostly painful.
Yeah.
Because the memory is of something like a photograph. It's of something that no longer exists. But unless we accept that, unless we embrace that, and I use the word embrace because I think it has to be more full-throated than the usual thing of, oh yeah, that's kind of painful, I don't want to think about it, or oh yeah, I'll think about it, but not for very long. I think it has to be a daily act of living in pain, and I don't see that as miserable in any way. Like, in fact, it's joyful rather than miserable. It's painful, but that person is alive every day that you live in the pain of their disappearance, or the pain of someone else's misery, or of the pain of the things that you wish you could fix but you can't. You have to do that. Herbert, in a wonderful poem called "The Bag," says that basically the Lord may not hear, but he cannot close his heart. And he tells the story basically of Christ being wounded by the Roman soldier in the last hours of his life, the spear stuck in his side, and blood dripping. That's often figured for us in paintings. And Herbert, in a almost surrealistic moment, says that wound in his side, if we understand the story correctly, is a mailbag. That basically we can put all our sighs and groans and miseries into the side of Christ, and he'll take it to his Father.
Wow.
I think that's an amazing idea, because it means that God is suffering with us every moment that we're suffering. I believe that. That's the second thing for me, is that I believe that God suffers with me. And I've always had that belief, that one of the great graces in life is that God always has an open heart, that I can have an open heart only because God has an open heart. If the third thing that always has been important to me is that, with my son now, is that Christ said to his disciples when he was about to be crucified, that I must go away so you can be comforted. And of course, that's a really weird thing to say to people when they love you, and you say, I have to go away now so you may be comforted. What does that mean? Well, obviously, we know it has to do with the Holy Spirit. But I think what I've learned, experience, I should say, not learned, because it's not really a learning thing. It's an experiential thing. What I've experienced is that notion that my son's going away. And you could put this in religious terms, because of the permanent resurrection of Christ, that I'm comforted. But I would just put it in ordinary terms, that we're comforted because though your son goes away, like Christ, he never goes away. There's a fundamental here-ness of the dead that we love, the communion of saints, as we like to say, that's crucial to our well-being in times of utter misery. It's that open heart of God that can't be closed that Herbert talks about. And if you believe in that open heart, or you experience that open heart, I think it allows the deepest suffering at least to be experienced with the sense that we still live in a world that helps us through it.
Yeah, that's. Thank you. I know that's a very searing thing to talk about, but you talk about it as a man who lives kind of in the triduum every day, with Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday, and there's not any way to as you said, they're inextricably bound. There's no way to separate one with the other. Bob, I want to ask you. Simone Weil once said, quote, "The best proof of the good resides in the way the forces of entropy and destruction are kept at bay, if only barely," close quote, which is, I just love that. As a matter of fact, I just gave a talk after a white mass, and I quoted you quoting Weil. What role does your writing play to your way of understanding in keeping the dark forces and the entropy at bay?
I don't know if it keeps it at bay. It allows me to bring them in full, and then try to move through them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That it's not, writing can't be escapist in any way. It has to be. It has to take a good hard look at the things that are seem insufferable until you're suffering them, and realize, no, we can suffer them too.
Yeah.
And I think that what Weil is getting at is that fundamental sense that, as you read before about the business of hope, at the bottom of everything, and you could look at this even in the darkest ways. Like, we could destroy the entire planet. We could choke it with our carbon, our fossil fuels, and our misuse of water, and all the stuff that we fear with global warming, all the storms that are hitting and fires that are raging, and yet the world would still be there. There's that. They would go that far. I think anyway would go as far as to say, there's still the givenness of the planet itself, even if we screw it up entirely. Let's hope we don't. But there's still something that has been gifted us that we misused, and that's always a hope. There's always the hope that to me, that there's some kind of fundamental goodness that we'll come to recognize at some point. We'll experience the agony of coming alive. We'll let all the stuff that you read about Kunitz's family, and all the things that we suffer each day, come into our lives in a way that we can come through the other side. Because there is no escaping those things. There's only making peace with them. When my son died, I have three sons. I took my other two children. They were full, grown up and in their 20s, and I took them to the funeral home before the funeral home had worked on my son. And I said to him that, I want to just sit here in the basement with your brother, and I want you to touch him. I want you to touch his face and hold his hand. And I want you to do that. I want to stay here, the three of us, until we grow comfortable with his being dead and being with him in this time. And we did. We stayed for about an hour and a half, and each of us, touched him and held his hand and stroked his hair. And I think that touch stays with us. That touch now seems like a blessing, I think, to my sons. That they had to go through the death in a sensory way almost, to not come out the other side, because they'll never come out the other side. But you, like everything I've said, I think the more we face what we most fear, the better off we are in the end. And the more we accept the fact that we do live in an in-between space, between what we can understand and what we can never understand, and not fret about that, but participate in it fully. Always, what's the old definition of faith, or belief? It's like faith seeking understanding, I think that's the correct way, that faith is always seeking understanding. That's the best we can do. If we're faithful, we're always seeking understanding, an understanding that we'll never get. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it, because the faithfulness itself is almost like necessary grace. I think the more we accept our role of living in that in-between space, and accepting the fact that we have to be in pursuit of understanding, that faith is always in pursuit of understanding, even though it's riddled with doubts and misunderstandings and inability to understand, that's our task. That's part of what living really involves. And that we'll live more fully for doing that.
Bob, final question. At the conclusion of one of your chapters, you quote a passage from Adam Zagajewski's book, Another Beauty, saying, quote, "It could equally well apply to a lifetime of reading as it could to a lifetime," close quote. And here's what I think Zagajewski says: "To wake and fall asleep, drowse off and waken, to pass through seasons of doubt, melancholy dark as lead, indifference, boredom, and then the spells of vitality, clarity, hard and happy work, contentment, gaiety, to remember and forget and recollect again that an eternal fire burns inside us, a God with an unknown name who we will never reach." So Bob, though we strive, yeah. I mean, it's such a power. Yeah. It's what suffuses your entire book. It suffuses our entire conversation. And what I so understand from what you're saying, what I so understand from what you're writing is embrace it. Embrace it. Don't sever, don't distract, don't drowse, don't get drunk on the distractors of life so as to spare yourself, because to do so is to make you, as Bernano would say, a stump of a man, a stump of a woman. And so I say to you, and my last question is, as though we strive to pierce the veil, to understand the mystery, to obliterate the gap between God and us in our present veil of tears, we obviously fail. Do you believe that notwithstanding your suffering and mine, there will be, in fact, a sublime homecoming that will render the body of Christ into a seamless whole?
I wish I could answer that one. I think I exist in an in-between there as well.
Yeah.
And that doesn't bother me. It doesn't make me love Christianity or Christ or God less in any way. It's something that I feel that's also part of my in-betweenness, that I have to live in the fullness of faith and suffering, even certainly without the certainty that somehow on the other side it's all going to be okay. I think that this life that I've been given is such a gift that the rest of it doesn't matter in some ways to me. I don't mean to brush off that at all. And I don't mean to say to people who believe in an afterlife that they're wrong in any way. I try to live on this side of life as fully as I can, with the understanding that this is the life I've been given, and I need to try to come fully awake in this life. And I accept what I can't know. Do I have faith that my faith is something like an embrace of love in the world after this one. And that's the best I can do, I think.
Robert Cording, professor, poet, and expositor of the world's fullness. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, Todd.
So I've been thinking, I don't know. These three words really struck me. As Robert Cording records in his book, Finding the World's Fullness, quote, in her 1996 Nobel Prize speech, the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska said that three little words formed the beginning of everything she wrote. Those three words were, I don't know, close quote. While these three words may be commonly unsettling, they are also surprisingly reassuring. They declare what we know by brute instinct and honest experience. We know that we don't always know, that life and the world we live in is full of mystery. The logical is coupled with the ineffable, certainty is twinned with wonder. We know, and yet we don't know. And this is good. Our world is enthralled with knowledge. We want to name and understand everything. Instead of being dazzled by the lilting flight of the butterfly, we too eagerly snatch it, pin it down, and dissect it. To explain everything, we tell ourselves, is to control everything. And to control everything is to avoid the risks in life, the risks of danger and failure, the risks of angst and regret. This, we convince ourselves, is to find peace and happiness. But what kind of life is that? The greatest risk we avoid in struggling to know everything is the risk of truly living. It is a cramped, buttoned-down, tightly operated, mechanistic existence. Inhuman, really. What Robert Cording espouses in his book is that while suffering is unavoidable in life, being hell-bent on control and thus closed off to wonder is not to eliminate suffering, but to compound it. In our fear of living, we miss the joy of living. Instead of eradicating vexing uncertainty, we should live life for the adventure it is. We should face the day's offerings with its intoxicating joys and fearsome trials, and overcome it with an indomitable grin and a resolute spirit. This attitude doesn't change reality. We will all still suffer at one time or another, to one degree or another, and we will all ultimately surrender to death. We can't perfectly control the entropy of life or the destruction that can ensue. But as Simone Weil once said, quote, the best proof of the good resides in the way the forces of entropy and destruction are kept at bay, if only barely, close quote. So today, do not fear. Embrace mystery and wonder. Bear your suffering like a saint, and know that in doing so, you are truly living, by keeping the forces of entropy and destruction at bay, if only barely. And one last thing. Read Robert Cording's book, Finding the World's Fullness, but also use his book as a curriculum of sorts, pointing to the writings of Wallace Stevens and William Butler Yeats, Simone Weil and Stanley Kunitz. These are figures that inspired Robert Cording, but they will also help us sense the reality and reassurance of a life imbued with mystery. I don't know is no longer a phrase of fear, but a declaration of astonishment at the world. Thank you once again for joining me on the Evangelization Culture Podcast. I'm Todd Warner, and until we meet again, keep bringing Christ to a hungry culture.